Have you ever noticed that the moment you stopped defending yourself, stopped arguing, and stopped reacting to every attack, everything around you suddenly changed? The people who once seemed so confident began acting nervous. The ones who thrived on provoking you became restless. Why? Because they were never feeding on the truth. They were feeding on your reaction. Every emotional response gave them exactly what they wanted: your attention, your energy, and your peace. But today, that cycle has ended. You have discovered a strength they never expected. A strength rooted in self-control, wisdom, and unwavering faith. What they thought would break you has instead built you into someone who refuses to be manipulated. In this message, we're going to uncover why your silence has become more powerful than any argument, why those who tried to trap you are now panicking, and how choosing peace over retaliation can completely transform your life. If you've ever felt misunderstood, falsely accused, or targeted by people who wanted to see you fall, stay with me until the very end. This isn't just another motivational talk. It's a reminder that when you stop reacting to darkness, you give light the opportunity to lead. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving your enemies wrong. It's becoming so emotionally and spiritually unshakable that their schemes lose all power over you. Today, you'll discover why your calm has become their greatest fear, how your faith is turning every setback into preparation for something greater, and why your next chapter begins the moment you refuse to play the game they designed to keep you trapped. Your silence destroyed their greatest weapon. There comes a moment in life when you realize that not every accusation deserves a response, not every insult deserves an explanation, and not every battle is worth fighting. That realization changes everything. For a long time, the people who wanted to keep you emotionally exhausted understood one simple truth. If they could make you react, they could distract you from your purpose. They knew exactly which buttons to push. They knew which words would make you angry, which rumors would make you defend yourself, and which situations would leave you questioning your own worth. Every time you responded with frustration, they felt as though they had won. It wasn't because they were right. It was because they had succeeded in pulling your attention away from your peace. Manipulation has always depended on reaction. Without your emotional response, their tactics lose their strength. That is why the day you chose silence instead of another argument became the day everything started to change. Silence is often misunderstood. Many people assume that remaining quiet is a sign of weakness or surrender, but real silence is neither. It is a decision. It is the discipline to recognize that your peace is too valuable to hand over to someone who has no intention of understanding you. There is a powerful difference between staying silent because you are afraid and staying silent because you have grown beyond the need to prove yourself. One comes from fear, while the other comes from confidence. When you truly know who you are, you stop feeling obligated to convince everyone else. You begin to understand that your character speaks louder than your defense ever could. People who rely on manipulation become uncomfortable when they can no longer predict your behavior. They expect the old version of you to appear. They expect the emotional reaction, the lengthy explanation, the desperate attempt to clear your name, or the frustration that once gave them a sense of control. But instead, they are met with something they never prepared for: your calm. Suddenly, their carefully designed trap has nowhere to go. It is like throwing a hook into empty water. There is nothing for it to catch. What once worked effortlessly now accomplishes nothing. That silence begins to expose something they never wanted others to see. The problem was never you. The problem was the game they were trying to play. Life has a way of revealing people's intentions over time. Someone who genuinely cares about you seeks understanding. Someone who only wants control seeks reaction. Those are two very different motivations. A person who values truth will ask questions before making assumptions. A manipulative person will create confusion, because confusion gives them influence. They know that if they can keep you defending yourself, you will never have enough energy to focus on your calling, your family, your dreams, or your relationship with God. Distraction has always been one of the enemy's favorite tools. If he cannot destroy your purpose, he will try to delay it by keeping your emotions tied to people who were never assigned to your future. There is something deeply freeing about reaching the point where you no longer need everyone to understand your journey. You begin to trust that time has a way of uncovering truth. Lies may travel quickly, but truth has endurance. False accusations may gain attention, but integrity gains respect. You stop chasing people who have already decided not to believe you. Instead, you invest your energy into becoming the person God created you to be. That shift changes your entire outlook on life. Instead of asking, How do I make them see the truth? You begin asking, how do I continue walking faithfully regardless of what they think? That is where real growth begins. Scripture repeatedly reminds us that wisdom is often shown through restraint. Anyone can react in anger. Anyone can return insult for insult. But it takes maturity to answer hostility with peace. It takes faith to believe that justice does not always require your intervention. Sometimes God works most powerfully when you stop trying to manage every opinion people have about you. He sees what others cannot. He knows the conversations that happen behind closed doors, the motives hidden beneath polite smiles, and the intentions disguised as concern. Nothing escaped his attention. Because of that, you can release the burden of constantly defending yourself. One of the greatest blessings of silence is that it protects your energy. Emotional exhaustion has robbed countless people of opportunities they were meant to pursue. Imagine how much time is wasted trying to correct every rumor, answer every critic, or satisfy every person determined to misunderstand you. That time could have been spent building your future, strengthening your faith, learning new skills, or encouraging someone who truly values your presence. Every unnecessary argument costs something. Sometimes it costs your peace, sometimes it costs your focus. Sometimes it even costs relationships with people who simply grow tired of the constant conflict. Choosing silence is often choosing preservation. Ironically, your silence often says more than your words ever could. When people see that you refuse to join the chaos, they begin asking their own questions. They notice the contrast between your calm spirit and the constant noise created by those attacking you. Over time, consistent character becomes impossible to ignore. People may forget the rumors, but they remember integrity. They remember kindness. They remember patience. They remember someone who refused to become bitter, even when given every reason to be. That quiet consistency becomes a testimony no speech can replace. If you are in a season where you feel misunderstood, resist the temptation to measure your worth by other people's opinions. Continue living with honesty. Continue treating others with respect. Continue walking in faith even when recognition is delayed. Your silence is not empty. It is filled with confidence, wisdom, and trust that God is working behind the scenes. Every day you refuse to react to manipulation, you reclaim another piece of your peace. Every day you choose purpose over drama, you weaken the power that negativity once held over your life. And eventually, those who depended on your reactions will realize that the weapon they trusted most no longer works, because the person they once controlled has become someone they can no longer shake. That is not weakness. That is freedom, and freedom is far more powerful than any argument you could ever win. Their trap only worked while you played their game. One of the most life-changing lessons you will ever learn is that every trap needs a participant. No matter how carefully someone plans to manipulate you, their strategy cannot succeed unless you unknowingly agree to play by their rules. That is exactly how emotional manipulation works. It is never just about the words they speak or the situations they create. It is about getting you to react in a predictable way. They want you to defend yourself before anyone has even questioned you. They want you to lose your temper so they can point to your anger instead of their behavior. They want you to become so emotionally overwhelmed that you forget your purpose and spend your days trying to prove your innocence. As long as you stayed caught in that cycle, they felt powerful. They believed they were controlling the outcome because they could control your emotions. But everything changed the moment you recognized the pattern and made a simple yet powerful decision. You stopped playing the game. Many people spend years trapped in invisible battles because they never realized the conflict was designed to distract them rather than defeat them. Every argument, every unnecessary confrontation, every rumor, and every attempt to provoke you was pulling your attention away from the life you were called to build. While you were busy defending yourself, your dreams were waiting. While you were trying to convince people who had already chosen not to believe you, valuable opportunities were passing by. The enemy of your peace does not always attack through obvious destruction. Sometimes the greatest attack is distraction. If someone can keep your mind occupied with drama, they do not have to stop your progress. You will stop yourself by giving all your energy to things that never deserved it in the first place. Think about a chess match. A skilled player never reacts emotionally to every move the opponent makes. Instead, they stay focused on the bigger picture. They understand that some moves are designed to lure them into making mistakes. If they respond impulsively, they lose their advantage. Life works much the same way. Not every criticism deserves an answer. Not every insult deserves your attention. Some situations are carefully arranged to pull you away from wisdom, and into emotional decision-making. The strongest person in the room is often the one who remains calm while everyone else is losing control. That kind of self-discipline is not weakness. It is evidence of growth. The people who depended on your reactions often become confused when you stop responding the way you used to. They expect you to argue. They expect long messages defending yourself. They expect emotional outbursts and desperate explanations. Instead, they are met with silence, confidence, and peace. Suddenly, their strategy begins to collapse because they built it around the assumption that you would always react the same way. Manipulation is predictable. It depends on routine. Once you break that routine, the manipulator loses their greatest advantage. They no longer know how to influence you because the version of you they understood no longer exists. Growth often looks unfamiliar, even to the people who have known you the longest. They remember the person who was easily offended, quick to explain, and constantly seeking approval. But now they are meeting someone different. They are meeting someone who has learned that peace is more valuable than being right in every conversation. They are meeting someone who understands that protecting their heart is more important than winning an argument. They are meeting someone whose confidence comes from within rather than from the opinions of others. That transformation is difficult for some people to accept because it means they have lost access to the emotional control they once enjoyed. There is also a spiritual lesson hidden within this journey. Faith teaches us that not every battle belongs to us. Some battles belong to God. Too often we exhaust ourselves trying to fight wars that were never ours to begin with. We believe that if we just explain ourselves one more time, people will finally understand. We imagine that one perfect response will silence every critic. Yet experience teaches us something different. People who are committed to misunderstanding you rarely change because of another explanation. Their minds were made up long before the conversation began. Wisdom is knowing when your words will plant seeds and when they will simply be ignored. When you stop playing the game, you begin reclaiming things you did not even realize you had lost. You reclaim your peace because your emotions are no longer controlled by someone else's actions. You reclaim your time because you are no longer spending hours thinking about people who contribute nothing positive to your future. You reclaim your confidence because your identity is no longer built upon public opinion. Most importantly, you reclaim your purpose because your energy is finally directed toward building instead of constantly defending. This does not mean life suddenly becomes free of criticism. In fact, some people may become even louder because your silence frustrates them. They may increase their efforts, hoping to provoke the old version of you into returning. But every time you refuse to react, you send a clear message that their influence has ended. Their words may still exist, but their power does not. There is a tremendous difference between hearing negativity and allowing negativity to control your heart. Mature people learn to separate the two. Over time, your consistency begins speaking louder than any defense you could have offered. People observe how you carry yourself. They notice that despite the accusations, you continue showing kindness. Despite the criticism, you continue working hard. Despite the attempts to discourage you, you continue moving forward with grace and determination. Character has a remarkable way of revealing itself through daily actions. While false stories eventually lose momentum, genuine integrity grows stronger with time. Those who truly seek the truth will recognize the difference. Perhaps the greatest victory is realizing that your happiness no longer depends on changing the minds of those who refuse to see your heart. Freedom begins when you stop measuring your value by their approval. Your life becomes lighter because you are no longer carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. You discover that peace is not found in winning every argument, but in refusing to let unnecessary conflict steal your joy. Every day you choose wisdom over reaction. Every day you choose faith over fear, and every day you choose purpose over distraction. You become stronger than the circumstances that once controlled you. So if you find yourself facing another attempt to provoke you, remember this simple truth. A trap only works when someone steps into it. You have already learned where the hidden snares are. You have already seen how manipulation disguises itself as conflict. You have already experienced the cost of giving your energy to people determined to waste it. Now you have a different choice. Walk past the trap. Keep your eyes on your purpose. Protect your peace. Trust that truth has a way of revealing itself in time. The greatest revenge is not proving someone wrong. It is living a life so full of wisdom, faith, and purpose that their game no longer has a place in your story. God is teaching you the power of self-control. There are seasons in life when it feels as though every day brings a new challenge. Someone misunderstands your intentions, spreads false stories, questions your character, or deliberately tries to pull you into conflict. In moments like these, the natural response is to fight back. We want to defend ourselves, explain every detail, and make sure everyone knows our side of the story. That reaction is deeply human. Yet one of the greatest lessons God teaches his children is that true strength is not measured by how loudly you can defend yourself, but by how wisely you can control yourself. Self-control is one of the quietest forms of power, and because it is quiet, many people overlook it. They mistake calmness for weakness, patience for fear, and silence for defeat. But those who walk closely with God eventually discover that self-control is not the absence of strength. It is strength that has been surrendered to wisdom. When you first begin this journey, it can feel uncomfortable. Every insult seems to demand an answer. Every accusation feels personal. Every act of disrespect tempts you to respond immediately. Yet with every challenge, God is shaping something far more valuable than a quick victory. He is shaping your character. Character is not formed during easy days when everyone supports you. Character is built during difficult moments when you have every reason to react, but choose a higher path instead. It is in those moments that your faith moves beyond words and becomes visible through your actions. Many people believe maturity comes with age, but that is not always true. Real maturity comes from learning how to govern your emotions instead of allowing your emotions to govern you. Anyone can react in anger. Anyone can return harsh words with even harsher words. Anyone can seek revenge when they feel hurt. But it takes a transformed heart to pause before speaking, to think before acting, and to pray before responding. That pause may only last a few seconds, but it often determines whether you walk in peace or regret. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that immediate reactions always produce immediate justice. In reality, emotional decisions often create problems that last much longer than the situation itself. A single moment of uncontrolled anger can damage years of trust. One impulsive response can give your critics exactly what they wanted. They may forget everything they did to provoke you, but they will point to your reaction as proof that you were the problem all along. That is why self-control is so powerful. It protects you from becoming the very thing you are trying to overcome. God understands something we often forget. Not every battle is meant to be fought with words. Some battles are won through patience. Some are won through consistency. Some are won simply by refusing to let bitterness take root in your heart. When you choose self-control, you are making a declaration that your emotions belong to God, not to the people trying to provoke you. You are saying that your peace is too valuable to be controlled by someone else's behavior. That decision changes everything because it removes the power others once had over your emotional well-being. There is something remarkable about people who remain calm under pressure. Their peace cannot be explained by circumstances because their peace comes from somewhere deeper. It comes from trusting that God sees what they cannot see. He knows every hidden motive, every whispered conversation, every false accusation, and every act of injustice. Because of that, they no longer feel responsible for controlling every outcome. They trust that God is working behind the scenes, even when nothing appears to be changing on the surface. This does not mean self-control is easy. In fact, it is often one of the hardest spiritual disciplines to develop. There will be days when you want to answer every critic. There will be moments when your heart aches to defend your reputation. There will be times when remaining silent feels unfair. Yet those are often the very moments when God is teaching you the difference between temporary satisfaction and lasting peace. Winning an argument may feel good for a moment, but protecting your character will bless your life for years to come. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are it is not because they always had the perfect comeback or because they won every disagreement. It is because they carried themselves with dignity even when life became difficult. They treated others with respect without compromising their own values. They remained humble in success and gracious under pressure. That kind of character does not appear overnight. It is developed through countless decisions to choose wisdom over impulse, forgiveness over resentment, and faith over fear. Self-control also protects your future. Every dream God places in your heart requires a level of emotional stability. Opportunities often arrive disguised as difficult situations. A future leader must learn patience before leading others. A future mentor must learn compassion before offering guidance. A future blessing often depends on today's obedience. If God entrusted great responsibility to someone who could not control their emotions, that responsibility would quickly become a burden instead of a blessing. Sometimes the delay you experience is not punishment. It is preparation. God is strengthening your spirit so that when your next season arrives, you will have the wisdom to handle it well. Another beautiful truth about self-control is that it changes the atmosphere around you. Instead of adding more anger to an already angry world, you become a source of peace. Instead of spreading conflict, you create stability. People begin noticing that you respond differently. They may not understand your faith, but they cannot ignore its effect on your life. Your calmness becomes a testimony that God is working within you. Your patience becomes evidence that you are no longer driven by pride. Your kindness toward those who have wronged you becomes proof that your heart is being transformed. That transformation also frees you from carrying unnecessary burdens. Bitterness is exhausting. Constant anger drains the soul. Living with the desire to prove yourself to everyone steals the joy God intended for you to experience. Self-control breaks those chains. It reminds you that your identity is not built upon other people's opinions, but upon God's purpose for your life. Once you understand that truth, criticism loses much of its power. You no longer need everyone's approval, because you know whose approval truly matters. As you continue walking with God, you will discover that self-control is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending you are never hurt. It is about bringing those emotions before God instead of allowing them to control your actions. It is choosing prayer before revenge, wisdom before impulse, and peace before chaos. Every time you make that choice, your faith grows stronger. Every time you refuse to be pulled into unnecessary conflict, your character becomes more refined. Every time you trust God instead of your anger, you step closer to the person He created you to become. In the end, the greatest victories are rarely the loudest ones. They are the quiet moments when you walk away from conflict with your integrity intact, your heart at peace, and your faith stronger than before. Those victories may never receive applause from the world, but they are celebrated in heaven because they reveal a heart that has learned one of God's greatest lessons. Real power is not found in controlling other people. It is found in allowing God to help you control yourself. When you master that lesson, no trap, no criticism, and no act of manipulation can truly steal the peace that God has placed within you. Their fear comes from losing control, not losing the argument. There is an important truth that many people do not recognize until much later in life. Not everyone who argues with you is searching for the truth. Some people are not interested in understanding your heart, hearing your perspective, or finding peace. Their real goal is to maintain control. As long as they could influence your emotions, dictate your decisions, or keep you trapped in endless cycles of conflict, they felt secure. It gave them a sense of power. They believed they could predict your next move because they knew exactly how to provoke you. But something changed. You grew. You became wiser. You stopped allowing every criticism to shake your confidence and every accusation to steal your peace. The moment you reclaimed control over your own emotions was the moment they realized they had lost control over you. That realization is what truly unsettles them. Control often disguises itself in subtle ways. It does not always appear as obvious manipulation or harsh commands. Sometimes it looks like criticism designed to make you question yourself. Sometimes it appears through guilt, making you feel responsible for other people's happiness while ignoring your own well-being. Other times it comes through emotional games, where affection is given only when you behave the way someone expects. These patterns can continue for years because they become familiar. You begin believing that keeping everyone else happy is your responsibility. You start measuring your worth by how successfully you avoid conflict. Without realizing it, your life slowly becomes centered around managing other people's reactions instead of following God's purpose. One day, however, something inside you begins to awaken. Maybe it happens after one disappointment too many. Maybe it comes after countless sleepless nights spent worrying about people who never truly appreciated your efforts. Or perhaps God quietly opens your eyes to the truth that your peace was never meant to depend on someone else's approval. Whatever the reason, you begin making different choices. You stop apologizing for things that were never your fault. You stop chasing people who only notice you when they need something from you. You stop explaining yourself to individuals who have already decided not to understand. Most importantly, you stop allowing fear to guide your decisions. That transformation is difficult for controlling people to accept because it changes the entire relationship. They were comfortable with the old version of you, the version that always sought their approval, constantly defended yourself, and carried the emotional weight of every disagreement. That version was predictable. They knew exactly which words would make you feel guilty, anxious, or defensive. But now they are standing before someone who responds differently. Instead of reacting with panic, you respond with peace. Instead of arguing, you quietly move forward. Instead of allowing their opinions to define your value, you place your confidence in God. Suddenly, they find themselves unable to influence you the way they once could. This is why some people become louder when they realize they are losing control. They increase the criticism. They repeat old accusations. They may even try to involve other people, hoping public pressure will force you back into familiar patterns. They mistake volume for influence. They believe that if they create enough noise, you will eventually return to reacting the way you used to. But wisdom teaches us that not every loud voice deserves our attention. Sometimes the strongest response is continuing to walk forward without looking back. The beautiful thing about spiritual growth is that it changes your priorities. You begin asking different questions. Instead of wondering, how can I make everyone like me? You begin asking, am I living in a way that honors God? Instead of constantly worrying about how people perceive you, you focus on becoming the person God has called you to be. This shift is incredibly freeing because it places your identity on a foundation that cannot be shaken by changing opinions. Human approval is temporary. God's purpose is eternal. Fear often reveals itself when control begins to disappear. Imagine someone who has spent years believing they could influence every decision you made. Suddenly, they realize they cannot. That loss creates uncertainty. They no longer know how to predict your choices because your decisions are no longer based on pleasing them. They cannot manipulate your emotions because you have learned to guard your heart. They cannot distract you from your purpose because your eyes are fixed on something greater. What they interpret as distance is actually maturity. What they call stubbornness is often healthy boundaries. What they see as rejection is simply your refusal to return to unhealthy patterns. One of the greatest gifts God gives his children is discernment. Discernment allows you to recognize the difference between someone who lovingly corrects you and someone who constantly controls you. Loving correction is rooted in care, humility, and a desire to help you grow. Control is rooted in fear, pride, and the desire to maintain influence. Once you recognize that difference, your relationships begin to change. You no longer confuse manipulation with love or guilt with responsibility. You understand that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, honesty, and freedom, not fear. As you continue growing, you may notice something surprising. The people who genuinely love you will celebrate your newfound confidence. They will be happy to see you becoming stronger, wiser, and more peaceful. They do not feel threatened by your growth because real love never fears another person's healing. Those who become upset by your emotional health often reveal more about themselves than about you. Their discomfort is not caused by your success, but by the fact that your success removes the control they once believed they had. There is tremendous peace in reaching the point where you no longer need to win every argument. You realize that proving yourself to the wrong people rarely changes anything. Instead, you allow your life to become your testimony. Your kindness speaks, your consistency speaks, your integrity speaks. Over time, people notice that while others remain trapped in conflict, you continue moving forward with quiet confidence. That kind of stability cannot be manufactured. It comes from a heart that has learned to trust God more than public opinion. Perhaps one of the hardest lessons is accepting that not everyone will celebrate your freedom. Some people benefited from your insecurity. Others were comfortable with your constant need for approval. When those things disappear, they may accuse you of changing. The truth is, you have changed, but in the best possible way. You have become someone who values peace over chaos, wisdom over impulse, and purpose over endless distraction. That is not something to apologize for. It is evidence of growth. As you move into this new season of life, remember that your greatest responsibility is not to control how others feel about you. Your responsibility is to live with integrity, walk in faith, and protect the peace God has placed in your heart. You cannot control every opinion, silence every critic, or satisfy every expectation, but you can choose your response. You can choose forgiveness over bitterness, wisdom over anger, and faith over fear. In the end, the panic you sometimes see in others is rarely about losing an argument. Arguments come and go. What truly frightens those who depended on controlling you is realizing that they no longer have access to your mind, your emotions, or your direction. You have placed your confidence in God instead of people, your hope in purpose instead of approval, and your future in His hands instead of theirs. That is the kind of freedom no manipulation can overcome. And once you have tasted that freedom, there is no reason to return to the chains you have already left behind. Your next season begins, Where their manipulation ends there comes a defining moment in every person's journey when they realize they cannot keep carrying yesterday's battles into tomorrow's blessings. For so long, you may have lived under the weight of other people's opinions, expectations, and manipulation. You worried about saying the right thing, proving your innocence, and keeping peace with people who never truly wanted peace. It was exhausting. Every day felt like another test of your patience, another attempt to defend your character, and another reminder of how easily some people could disturb your emotions. But God never intended for you to spend your entire life trapped in cycles of drama and emotional warfare. He created you for purpose, not for endless conflict. The beautiful truth is that your next season does not begin when everyone finally understands you. It begins the moment you decide that your peace is more valuable than their approval. Many people believe that breakthrough happens because circumstances suddenly become perfect. They imagine that once every problem disappears, then they will finally experience joy. But life rarely works that way. More often than not, breakthrough begins inside you before it becomes visible around you. It starts with a change of heart. It begins when you stop allowing your happiness to depend on people who constantly create confusion. It begins when you accept that not everyone is meant to walk beside you into the future God has prepared. Some relationships are only meant for a season, and some lessons can only be learned by letting go of people who have become obstacles instead of blessings. One of the hardest truths to accept is that manipulation always comes with a cost. It steals your confidence because it convinces you to doubt yourself. It steals your time because it keeps you focused on unnecessary battles. It steals your peace because your emotions become tied to someone else's behavior. Worst of all, it steals your vision because when you are constantly looking backward, it becomes difficult to see the opportunities waiting ahead. That is exactly why God sometimes allows certain relationships to change. It is not because He wants to punish you. It is because He wants to protect the future He has prepared for you. Sometimes the greatest act of love is divine separation from people who cannot go where God is taking you. Think about a traveler carrying heavy bags on a long journey. At first, the weight seems manageable, but mile after mile, those bags become harder to carry. Eventually, the traveler reaches a point where they must make a decision: either continue carrying unnecessary weight or leave behind what no longer serves the journey. Spiritually, the same thing happens in our lives. Every grudge, every attempt to please impossible people, every unnecessary argument becomes another burden on your shoulders. You were never created to carry all of that forever. God invites you to lay those burdens down so you can walk freely into the future He is already prepared. One remarkable thing happens when manipulation loses its hold over your life. Your energy returns. Suddenly, you have time to focus on your dreams instead of your critics. You begin investing in your family, your faith, your health, your career, and the gifts God has placed within you. Instead of waking up worried about what someone might say, you wake up asking how you can make the most of the day God has given you. That shift is powerful because your attention determines your direction. Wherever your focus goes, your life follows. If your focus remains fixed on pain, pain will continue shaping your future. But if your focus turns toward purpose, purpose begins leading your steps. This new season also changes the way you see yourself. You stop viewing yourself through the eyes of those who misunderstood you. Instead, you begin seeing yourself through God's promises. You realize that your value has never been determined by public opinion, social approval, or the acceptance of people who refuse to appreciate your heart. Your identity was established long before those voices entered your life. God called you valuable before anyone criticized you. He gave your life purpose before anyone questioned your potential. Once that truth settles into your spirit, it becomes much harder for negativity to define you. Growth also teaches you something unexpected about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not pretending the hurt never happened. It is choosing not to allow the hurt to control your future. Some people think forgiving someone means inviting them back into the same position they once abused. That is not always wisdom. You can forgive while maintaining healthy boundaries. You can release bitterness without reopening doors that God has closed. Forgiveness sets your heart free, while boundaries protect the peace God has restored. As you continue moving forward, you may notice that some people become confused by your transformation. They remember the version of you who constantly reacted, defended yourself, and sought approval. They expect that person to return. Instead, they encounter someone who smiles more, worries less, and walks with quiet confidence. They wonder what changed. The answer is simple. You finally stopped giving them authority over your emotional life. You discovered that peace is not something other people give you. It is something God grows within you as you trust Him more deeply each day. There will always be individuals who misunderstand your silence. Some will call it pride because they no longer have access to your attention. Others may say you have changed. The truth is, you have changed, and that is something to celebrate. Growth always looks unfamiliar to people who benefited from your weakness. Healing often disappoints those who preferred you broken. Confidence unsettles those who relied on your insecurity. But never confuse someone else's discomfort with your failure. Their inability to adjust to your growth does not mean you should stop growing. God often prepares our greatest blessings during seasons when we think nothing is happening. While you were learning patience, He was developing wisdom within you. While you were choosing forgiveness over bitterness, He was strengthening your character. While you were walking away from manipulation, He was opening doors that no amount of striving could have forced open. Every difficult experience became preparation for something greater. Looking back, you will realize that the very situations meant to discourage you were quietly teaching you how to become the person capable of carrying the blessings that were on the way. The most beautiful part of this journey is discovering that peace becomes your new normal. You no longer feel the need to explain every decision or defend every misunderstanding. You trust that those who genuinely belong in your life will recognize your heart through your actions, not through endless explanations. You become more selective about where you invest your energy because you understand that your time is one of God's greatest gifts. Instead of wasting it on conflict, you spend it building a life that reflects His goodness. As this new chapter unfolds, remember that your future is not determined by the people who tried to manipulate you. It is determined by the God who never stopped guiding you. Their schemes may have delayed you for a season, but they could never cancel the purpose written over your life. Every step you take in faith moves you farther away from confusion and closer to clarity. Every decision to protect your peace strengthens your spirit. Every act of trust reminds you that God's plans are greater than any trap people tried to set before you. So walk confidently into this next season. Leave behind the need for constant approval. Leave behind the exhausting cycle of defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Leave behind the fear of disappointing those who never celebrated your growth in the first place. Your story is no longer defined by manipulation, betrayal, or emotional battles. It is defined by resilience, wisdom, faith, and hope. The chapter of reacting has ended. The chapter of becoming has begun, and the life waiting ahead of you is far greater than anything you had to leave behind.